to pick up Matthew Arndt from Matt Specialized Detailing. You might know him as Matty or Matt in the Hat. He is part of the podcast, Driven by Details podcast, and he also participates as a trainer for Gloss University too. He's a super knowledgeable guy, and I'm excited to do this 1968 Dodge Charger project with him. I'm on my way down to Illinois to grab him, and then we are going to shoot all the way over near Ann Arbor, Michigan, and meet up with Jesse from Jesse's Classics and Customs and get this project started. Let's roll! So I met Jesse Hernandez from Jesse's Classics and Customs back in November when we did a class with Colton from Linear Custom Blocks, and he puts on a multiple day body shop class that includes wet sanding and buffing on the last day. So Jason and Kilmer and myself participated in that class, and that's where we met Jesse. He had told me about his recent build, which is a 1968 Dodge Charger, and I actually saw this car parked outside of the West Hall at SEMA 2022. Now this car looks amazing and it's painted in a House of Kolours Candy paint job, but we came back to help him refine some of the dieback, shrinkage, and a couple little issues with the paint. Alright, so the paint on this thing is actually really good after Maddie and I took a look at it, but there is some shrinkage and some dieback, which is one of the reasons that we're here. So we're going to have to address the certain areas and decide how we're going to approach it. But we've kind of come up with a plan. Anything that's on the horizontal upward surfaces, we got to block it with 1000 in order to get rid of some of the dieback and some of the shrinkage. And I'm going to try to walk around and show you guys a little bit of it so that you can kind of understand what we're working with. The paint is dark, so it's hard to see in the camera, but hopefully you'll be able to see the movement and the things that we're going after.
Yeah, we expect to already crossed 150 tickets, and we haven't even been in school, so the real promotion starts today. The run to the show on Friday night really happens today. Yeah, it's Friday night, January 6th.
That's acapella night at Brighton High School tomorrow evening, starting at 7 p.m.
So when we got there, the car was pretty much clean. We did a waterless wash to clean off any dust or debris that was on the surface, made sure that we didn't need to clay bar or anything, and then we pretty much dove right into doing test spots, sanding on the hood. As Maddie and I inspected the areas, we did a couple test spots with 1000 grit. Oftentimes when you're dealing with texture removal, 1500 grit can work, but typically it does not level the surface as much as we're looking to get. So we did a couple test spots on the hood, and we decided to cut everything out with 1000 grit prior to then refining it with 1500 grit and then refining it even farther with 3000 grit. The shrinkage and dieback was all on the horizontal top surfaces and in some of the tighter areas that were harder to sand. In these areas, that's where we mainly focused. The sides and some of the other areas needed to be compounded to remove any of the isolated scratches that might have been left in from the first time, but overall it looked pretty good. So we did a two-step process on everything else, but ultimately the entire top surfaces of all the vehicle, including the hood, fenders, doors, quarter panels, and trunk, all got sanded. This car was already previously sanded when it came out of the paint booth. They started with 600 grit and they worked all the way up. And this paint actually looked phenomenal. This is one of the better paint jobs I've seen in a long time, and it's awesome that it comes from a small shop like this. That being said, this car was sprayed all at once with 8 coats of clear, so we should have plenty of material to work with without risking going through the clear coat itself or transitioning between clear coats. Traditionally in the past, A lot of custom car builders would paint an entire car, they would spray it out, sand it, and then respray it with clear coat, and they would call that flow coating. This seems like a great idea and that it would work well, and it does for the most part, but ideally you want to apply the clear coat all at one time. The reason being is that if the clear coat cures between the time of the first or second application, it's actually a cured barrier. So if you sand through the clear coat or you polish through the clear coat, you essentially see that you're removing a layer and you're going in between. It doesn't look nearly as bad as when you polish through the clear coat, but in the right lighting and with a certain angle, you'll be able to see a certain texture or haze where it goes between the layers. Even the best painters in the world battle this challenge, and this is the one thing that we want to try to avoid. Right here you can see a line caused by tape or a sand scratch of some sort that died back.
So everything's looking pretty good and smooth here. 1000 grit. Got a couple spots where we gotta try to block out and remove some of the movement in there, but overall, this is after one good solid pass and then going over it again, second, kind of even everything out. Looks really good. So we are gonna clean up some edge work, take care of this stuff in here, spend a little time in here, and then we can move on to 1500.
While this car looks really flat, the front fenders are actually really curved and contoured and need a lot of attention to make sure that you don't damage them. One of the harder things to do when sanding a car is making sure you remove the deeper sanding scratches between the steps that you take. So after we sanded the top surfaces with 1000 grit and 1500 grit on the sides, we went back in and we coated everything with guide coat. Now this chalk-like guide coat is typically used in the body shop for sanding primer or sanding your bodywork in general, but we use this for our finishing work to make sure that when we are sanding that we remove all those deeper 1000 grit scratches. I've typically done hand sanding throughout my entire career, but recently have started doing more and more DA sanding in between steps to help aid with my process. So after the 1000 grit, what I use is a 3M Trizact 3D printed abrasive that is purple in color, and it works a little bit different than dry papers or wet sanding. Because the abrasive is equally printed out, it helps really good at diminishing the amount of slurry that gets caught up underneath the pad, and it avoids pigtails. The biggest advantage that I've found with this is saving time when you're in a crunch or you only have so much time. This kind of work gets really expensive and the hours really add up. The film paper is a little bit stiffer than your traditional papers, so one of the only things that I have to do with this is only use it on the flat surfaces. Anything that has contours at all, we always go back to the hand blocking to avoid any pigtails or any gouging into the paint. The reason I do this is because I'm creating a step and change of movement between my steps. So when I 1000 grit sand scratch with block, I transition into a DA with 1500 grit, and then when I go into my 3000 grit and start polishing everything out, if I see straight sand scratches or I'm having challenges getting anything out, I know 100% that that scratch is a 1000 grit sand scratch. There's no other reason why it would be there. After the 1500 grit, we go over everything with a 3000 grit, 3M Trizact to DA it all down, and then we'll hand sand it out on top of that.
All right, it's the end of day one. We didn't get as far as we wanted to. We've got all the small parts and panels sanded to 2000 grit. All the big panels we have DA'd down with 1500. All we have to do is come back in the morning, hit everything back with 3000, and then we're ready to polish. Hopefully we can get the majority of this work done tomorrow, and then we can finish up everything on Saturday before we head home. Good night.
Check out part 2 next Thursday at 5 p.m. Central Time. Visit us on all of our social media at Oberk Car Care. We're on Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, and make sure you go visit us at oberkcarcare.com.